Tower Blue, 650 full, good bump. 27 left, clear to land, 230 at 20.
Ports are the lifeline of the global economy. They do not make headlines, but without them, world trade would come to a standstill. Over 80% of all global trade happens through the sea and is facilitated through these ports. And when it comes to ports in India, there is one name that dominates this landscape.
One of the country's largest business empires.
Adani Group.
Adani Group companies.
One of the stocks that is busting the charts this morning is Adani Ports.
Adani Ports and SEZ.
Adani Ports is the largest private port operator in India and controls 24% of India's total port capacity. Recently, they've been in the spotlight for their latest project, which has the potential to be a game changer for India, both from an economic and from a geopolitical standpoint. But do you know what makes the story of Adani Ports even more interesting? The fact that stepping into this business was a mere coincidence for Gautam Adani. In this video, we'll try to answer 5 questions. How did the Adani Group get into the ports business? How did they grow this business? How are they better than competition? What the future holds for Adani Ports? And what is this latest project that could be a game changer for India? But before we begin, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to this book, The Rise and Fall of Gautam Adani. It covers various aspects and businesses of the Adani Group, tries to talk about controversies surrounding them, including the political controversies, and has a whole chapter about Hindenburg and its allegations. If you're looking for an in-depth qualitative and quantitative analysis on the rise of the Adani Group, this is the book for you. I'll share the Amazon link in the description below. Anyway, that said, let's get started. Gautam Adani was always interested in starting his own business, which is why he dropped out of high school at the age of 16 and went to Bombay to get into the diamond trading business. Here is a bit about it from the man himself.
I was just 16 years old when I chose to give up my education and move to Mumbai. And after working at Mundra Brothers for about 3 years, I left to start my own brokerage in a diamond trading at a Javeri Bazaar. I still recall the day I did my first trade with a Japanese buyer. I made a commission of rupees 10,000.
However, this did not last very long. A few years later, in 1981, at the age of 19, Gautam Adani went back home and joined his brothers Vasant Adani and Mahasukh Adani in their plastic processing and packaging business. The business was seeing success, but nothing close to what was about to come. In the 1980s, India was facing an economic crisis. We were faced with rising crude oil prices, a global recession, and mounting external debt. This was a result of both our protectionist internal policies and a global landscape which was not favorable at all. Our foreign reserves had fallen to less than $5 billion. For reference, it stands at over $700 billion today. And the situation got so bad that RBI had to sell our country's gold. But as the saying goes, with every crisis comes a major opportunity. Amidst all these changes to bolster our foreign reserves, the Rajiv Gandhi government implemented a very favorable set of reforms, referred to as Rajiv Gandhi's EXIM policies. EXIM basically stands for Export-Import Policies. As a part of this, the government began significantly incentivizing export-related activities and also simplified trade procedures. This is because export-related activities basically help the country get foreign reserve because the payments would be made in foreign currencies, right? So, sensing this big opportunity, the Adani brothers shut their plastic processing and packaging business and went all in into exports. And this is how Adani Exports was formed in 1985. They began exporting commodities, pharmaceuticals, and anything they could find. And over time, they became a formidable name in Gujarat's exporting community. This is when the American food firm Cargill comes into the picture. Cargill was looking to export salt from the Kutch region of Gujarat, and they were looking for a trade partner for the same. This is where Adani Exports comes in, and the two formed a 50-50 joint venture. As a part of this joint venture, the two were about to acquire the Mundra Port. However, later, the Cargill group started demanding a higher stake in this venture, and Adani's dropped out. Cargill went ahead with another partner, and they started exporting their salt from the Kandla port, which was a much bigger port than the Mundra port. But this deal falling through ended up being a massive blessing in disguise. In the past, being involved in the exports business, Gautam had observed the inefficiencies of various ports in Gujarat. He felt that with efficient management of these ports, both time and money could be saved. And this is where he sensed a massive opportunity. A great indicator of the inefficiencies of port is that turnaround time. Turnaround time is basically the amount of time spent from when a vessel arrives at a port to when it leaves the port. The median turnaround time globally is about 1 day, whereas in the case of ports in India, even as of 2013, this figure was as high as 96 hours, which is basically 4 days. This goes on to tell you how inefficient our ports were. Why was that, you may ask? Because most of our ports were owned and operated by the government, and like most things which are government owned and government operated, they were just very inefficient. But things were beginning to change, especially in Gujarat. The Gujarat government was looking to develop and privatize some of their ports. They were finally willing to engage with private players, and I've also created a full-on video on this if you're interested in watching it out. It's called The Rise of Gujarat. Anyway, so in 1995, because of this one policy change, the Adani Group and the Gujarat government formed a 74-26 joint venture, and Adani's finally ended up acquiring the Mundra Port. This was a big moment because this one acquisition was set to change the entire fate of the Adani Group. Now, as great as this acquisition really was, things started off on a very slow and dull note, and it seemed very unpromising. Mundra Port was a mere 71 kilometers away from the much bigger and much better Kandla Port. Kandla Port at this point in time was India's largest port, and many doubted if the Mundra Port could ever survive the competition that it would receive from the Kandla Port. The biggest problem was that for a port to be a success, it has to be very well connected from the rest of the country, which basically means it has to have roadways and railway network to basically supply the goods from the port to the country and from the rest of the country to the ports. But unfortunately, at this point in time, there was no clear government policy on the connectivity of private ports. Adani, however, realized how important this was, and he individually negotiated with over 500 landowners and fought several lawsuits, but his perseverance prevailed. By 2003, the Mundra Port had 70 kilometers of railroads connecting it to the national rail network. Additionally, Adani paid a lot of attention in garnering as much efficiency as possible. He increased the capacity and went ahead with the mechanization of cargo handling. They basically used state-of-the-art technology and imported the finest equipments, which went on to reduce the turnaround time in Mundra Port. Any guesses by how much? Turnaround time in Mundra Port fell to less than 1 day. It came to around 18 to 22 hours. On the other hand, the turnaround time at the Kandla Port was still 3 to 4 days. And guess what happened as a result of this? David beat Goliath. In less than 15 years, Mundra Port went on to overtake Kandla Port and become the largest port of India. To understand the degree of this expansion, we just need to pay attention to two terms: dry cargo berths and liquid cargo berths. Dry cargo berths are basically port berths which are meant for solid or dry goods, such as metal, food grains, machinery, and containers. Whereas liquid cargo berths, just as the name suggests, is for liquid items, such as chemicals, petroleum, and liquefied natural gas. Now a quick comparison. Between 1997 and 2013, while Kandla Port grew from 8 dry cargo berths and 0 liquid cargo berths to 13 dry cargo and 6 liquid cargo berths, Mundra Port went from 0 dry and 0 liquid to 28 dry and 4 liquid cargo berths. Now you may ask, how did Adani expand Mundra Port so fast? Well, the answer is debt, debt, and more debt. Adani just has crazy risk-taking capacity. Post the success of Mundra Port, Adani Group went on to acquire 11 more ports, 10 in the country and 1 in Israel, the Haifa port, which took the total number of ports to 12. Success of Mundra Port also paved the way for Adani Group to enter other businesses which were a consequence of the Mundra Port, such as power generation, green energy, and the FMCG business. We won't get into that in this video, but I have made a video on that as well if you want to check it out, and I've also talked about it extensively in my book on Adani. Anyway, now we have answered 2 of the 5 questions that we set out to answer. How did Adani get into the ports business, and how did they grow this business? Now getting to the question of how are they better than competition? Well, there is one great case study and situation that goes on to explain this in a brilliant way. It also portrays the excellence of the Adani Group in the ports business relative to other players. Adani Ports did something that both L&T and Tata Group failed at. This is the story of the acquisition of Dhamra Port. Dhamra Port is located in Odisha, the east coast of India. Today, it is poised to become the biggest and most efficient port on the east coast of India with state-of-the-art technology and efficiency. But things weren't always this way for Dhamra Port. Dhamra Port began operations in April 2011. It was a joint venture between the infrastructural giant Larsen & Toubro, whom we all probably know as L&T, and Tata Steel. It was aimed to serve the resource-rich eastern coast of India and dealt with bulk cargo of coal, iron, and other natural resources. The duo, however, was struggling to even break even. The port had reported a loss of nearly 340 crores as of financial year 2013. And as a result of these losses, the two decided to sell the loss-making port in 2014, and guess who bought it? Adani Ports bought it for a startling sum of 5.5 thousand crores. Two of the most established business conglomerates of India had failed to operate it profitably, and many thought that Adani would fail as well. Adani, however, believed that he could replicate the success of the Mundra Port at Dhamra Port as well. In fact, these were Gautam Adani's exact words post the acquisition. The Dhamra Port acquisition now gives us the opportunity to replicate the development and phenomenal growth of Mundra Port on the eastern coast of India. Adani's plan was simple: increase capacity substantially, and with increased capacity would come cost saving and higher efficiency. But how would they increase capacity? The answer obviously is debt. In addition to increasing capacity, Dhamra Port even went on to acquire the best practices of the Mundra Port as his initial plan was. And guess what? It worked. By 2017, not only had the port broken even, it reported a profit of 180 crore rupees. Adani's risk had paid off, and Dhamra Port even today continues to grow at 25 to 30% annually, and there are no signs of stopping. Now do know that apart from just increasing capacity, there are also other reasons as to why Adani succeeded, whereas the joint venture between L&T and Tata Steel failed. The JV basically built the port for their own needs, whereas Adani Group built it to scale it. Further, the two entities had very different risk appetites. While Adani was okay taking a lot of risk, the duo was not. But this goes on to suggest something very profound. Where others saw losses and dead ends, Adani saw a starting point. This is not only true in the case of the Dhamra port, but also when the deal with Kargil failed, the Carmichael coal mine incident, and when Mundra was going to receive stiff competition from the Kandla port. By the way, if you want to know more about such incidents, do definitely read this book. I highly recommend you to buy it. Just go ahead and buy it, guys. Anyway, just last year, Adani acquired and started building the Vizhinjam Port in Kerala to address India's transshipment cargo problem. Now, not only is this really big for Adani Group, but also for the wider Indian economy and India from a geopolitical standpoint. Now, transshipment cargo is just like a flight change. Let's say you're going from Delhi to London and you take an Emirates flight. So you'll go from Delhi to Dubai, and then you'll change your flight and go from Dubai to London. Transshipment cargo is just the same. Goods and containers are going to be transferred from one ship to the other at an intermediate port. Currently, nearly 75% of India's transshipment cargo goes through other countries like Sri Lanka, Singapore, and Malaysia. Vizhinjam Port will drastically reduce India's dependence on these ports, saving millions if not billions in foreign exchange and reducing turnaround time in the case of cargo. This is also a great move because it will help India significantly reduce its reliance on other ports, particularly those in sensitive regions, such as Sri Lanka, which is increasingly coming under the Chinese influence. It will also help us increase our presence in the Indian Ocean region. And this answers the fifth question. Now let's just quickly go ahead and have a summary of the other four questions. How did Adani get into this business? Primarily because they first got into the exports business instead of the plastic processing business, and then the Kargil deal failed, which is why they ended up acquiring the Mundra port after sensing a great opportunity. How did they grow this business? By instilling insane levels of efficiency, which was unheard of and unseen in the Indian port landscape. How did they beat competition? Firstly, as a result of the same efficiency, and secondly, through constant expansion, which came as a result of high risk taking and leverage, which is basically debt. And finally, how does the future look? It looks really bright, and Adani does seem to be on track to become the largest port operator by 2030. This brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this particular video, I do also recommend you to watch our other video on Adani. Do also check out our book. And finally, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.